Many of the incidents of corruption that would in time be described as state capture became known to me as they did to the general public through the work of journalists, civil society organizations, and institutions such as the Public Protector and Auditor General. Reports of court cases and disciplinary proceedings, together with the commendable work of investigative journalists and whistleblowers, did help to give insight into corruption in both government and in the private sector. As it became increasingly clearer through the so-called Gupta leaks and other revelations that a network of individuals was seemingly colluding with a number of people in government to occupy key positions and capture key institutions, the question that arose was how best one should respond to all this. The first option for me, Chairperson, that was available to me was to resign from the executive. While I would have earned quite a lot of praise from many quarters, this action of resignation would have significantly impaired my ability to contribute to bring about what I would call an end to state capture. It would have caught the big headlines, newspapers, and that would have been the end of it. Had I and like-minded individuals resigned from the executive, we would have had no ability to resist some of the excesses that were taking place. And there was a clear danger that without some measure of resistance, there would have been even fewer impediments to the unfettered expansion of the state capture project. The second option was for me to be more confrontational, to speak out publicly against certain decisions or actions of the government as they were happening in that captured way. While there were instances where I did make public statements, there was also a limit to how confrontational one could be in the position that I held. A more confrontational approach would most likely have led to my removal from office with the same consequences as resignation. The third option was to acquiesce and thereby abet the committing of the misdeeds, just to go along and be part of it all. The fourth option available to me was to remain in my position as Deputy President and keep silent. The final option for me, which is what I chose, was to remain in my position as Deputy President, not to resign, not to acquiesce and go along and join in, or not to be confrontational, but to work with others in the executive to resist the abuses and bring about change where we could, and to sustain the work of social and economic transformation. Since assuming the office of President in 2018 February, the government that I lead has undertaken several measures to end state capture, to rebuild damaged institutions, and to foster a culture of ethical public service and accountability. In the main, the measures have aimed at changing the way the cabinet functions, strengthening institutions that had been captured, starting with changes in the leadership of some of these institutions, changing the way in which our state-owned enterprises also work, in the way they were managed and overseen by government as shareholder rather, and making necessary policy decisions to address shortcomings and to reinforce oversight. One of the critical projects currently underway to strengthen the state involves the professionalization of the public service. Now, this aims to ensure that the public service is shorn of political partisanship and that the most qualified individuals enter its ranks. This is a very current development that we're fostering. As this commission has heard, law enforcement agencies were deliberately weakened to limit their ability to act against those involved in corruption and state capture. It has therefore been a priority and remains an ongoing task of the administration I lead to rebuild and to restore the integrity of these institutions. The fundamental reality here is that state capture happened because certain individuals each made a deliberate decision to engage in acts of corruption and criminality. It is just, correct, and necessary that they face the consequences of their actions. Having borne witness to the crimes of state capture, the worst thing we can do is to allow it to ever happen again. We have a shared responsibility as a people to leave the era of state capture firmly behind us and to act together to prevent corruption in all its forms. This means, amongst other things, that we must reinforce the checks and the balances within our democratic dispensation that are meant to prevent the abuse of power. We must also strengthen our institutions that were established to support democracy and effectively capacitate our law enforcement agencies. We need to safeguard the freedom, independence, and the diversity of our media. We must professionalize the public service, and we must also attract skilled and professionally inclined people back into the public service. And as I said earlier, we also need, I want to put it in my concluding statement, we need to give whistleblowers the protection that you also spoke about, Chair. Because without whistleblowers, we will not be able to tackle corruption effectively. It is difficult to measure the effect of state capture on business and consumer confidence, on the loss of investment, because state capture also had an overarching impact on our ability to attract investment, because as investors looked at us as a country, they just saw a country that is mired in corruption, a state that has been captured by a particular family. And nobody wants to invest in a country like that, where one family runs everything in the body politic of the country. And as a person who occupied a position of authority during the state capture, or rather the state capture era, I must say I take full responsibility for the choices that I made myself and the actions that I took. I will not run away from those decisions. I have also sought to outline some of the measures this administration has taken to end state capture. I articulated quite a number of those in my opening statement, and and have reiterated here that we are taking corrective measures to obliterate state capture, and that it will take time, but we are going to stay the course.